You don't even need the money, my mother said, her voice carrying that same dismissive edge I had heard my whole life. She stood in my kitchen as if it belonged to her, casually waving her hand like the $10,800 she had just put on my credit card meant nothing. I looked down at the alert on my phone, the number staring back at me like a direct accusation. Caribbean Cruise Lines, luxury suite package. $10,800.47, to be exact. My hand shook slightly, but not out of surprise. I had stopped being surprised by my family's actions years ago. This felt different. It felt like the final strain on something that had been under pressure for far too long. My name is Jessica, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a senior accountant at Foxton Interactive, a gaming company based in Columbus, Ohio. Over the past 10 years, I've focused on building my career, saving carefully, and investing smartly enough to fully own 2 properties. One is a small apartment where I live alone with my cat. The other is a 3-bedroom house in a respectable neighborhood that I bought 5 years ago as an investment. That house, the one I worked overtime for and gave up vacations to afford, was currently occupied by my parents and my younger sister, Brittany, rent-free for the past 3 years. Brittany has been under so much stress lately, my mother continued, settling into one of my dining chairs as if she intended to stay a while. She really needed this vacation. You know how difficult things have been for her since the breakup. My 28-year-old sister had ended a 6-month relationship after her boyfriend suggested she might consider finding a job. That had happened 3 months earlier, and apparently being asked to contribute to society now required a luxury Caribbean cruise to recover from it. Mom, you used my credit card without asking, I said carefully, keeping my voice calm. That's fraud. She laughed, actually laughed, as if I had told a joke. Don't exaggerate, Jessica. We're family. We share things. Besides, your father and I are going too. We haven't taken a real vacation in years. I went to Florida last summer, I replied. That doesn't count. We stayed with your aunt. I took a slow breath as the familiar weight settled over me. This was always how it worked. My parents took, I gave, and I somehow became the unreasonable one for setting limits. I can't afford this right now, I said again, even though I knew it wouldn't change anything. I have bills. I have my own responsibilities. My mother's expression hardened, turning more calculated. You own 2 houses, Jessica. You earn good money at that computer job. Your father's back problems prevent him from working, and I've been holding the family together. We sacrificed everything for you girls, and this is how you repay us. The manipulation was practiced and smooth, almost convincing. Almost. But something had shifted. Maybe it was the amount itself. Maybe it was how easily she had used my financial information without hesitation. Or maybe I had simply reached the breaking point after years of the same behavior. When does the cruise leave? I asked quietly. Saturday morning. We'll be gone for 12 days. She smiled, clearly taking my question as agreement. It's going to be amazing. Brittany is thrilled. You should see the suite we booked. It even has a balcony. I nodded slowly, already thinking through what that meant. 12 days. They would be unreachable. Somewhere in the Caribbean, spending money that would take me months to recover, the money they had taken from me without hesitation. Enjoy it, I said, and I meant it in a way she could never fully grasp. My mother smiled warmly and reached out to pat my hand, as if I were a child who had finally learned how to share. I knew you'd understand. You've always been the responsible one, Jessica. The one we can rely on. Yes, I thought as I watched her pick up her purse and walk toward the door. I had always been the dependable one. The one who stepped in when they couldn't. The one who gave things up so Brittany could have whatever she wanted. The one who caught them every time they fell, even while they kept pushing me lower and lower. But that part of me was finished. When the door shut behind her, I opened my banking app and looked at the charge once again. $10,800. 3 years of rent-free living. Countless other bills I had paid over the years without recognition or gratitude. That figure wasn't just money owed. It represented everything I had allowed them to take from me. I opened a new browser tab and typed in the address of a real estate site I had saved months earlier, back when I first wondered if I would ever find the courage to do what needed to be done. The house. My house. The one they treated as if it belonged to them. It was time for change. The pattern didn't begin with the cruise. If I'm honest, it started long before I was old enough to notice. It was woven so deeply into our family that I mistook it for affection. Growing up, I was always the dependable one, the good daughter. I earned high grades without tutors or constant monitoring. Brittany, 4 years younger and blessed with the soft blonde beauty our mother valued above all else, was treated like royalty. She was fragile. She needed extra care. She couldn't be expected to take on the same responsibilities as her older sister because, somehow, life was always harder for her. When Brittany wanted dance classes, I gave up my place in the school band so our parents could afford them. When she needed a car for her 16th birthday, I quietly accepted that my college savings would be used instead. When Brittany dropped out of community college because it felt overwhelming, I was already working 2 jobs to pay my way through a state university. And somehow, that made me the selfish one when I wasn't available to help our mother with chores. "You've always had it easy," my mother would say whenever I pointed out the unfairness. "Things come naturally to you. Brittany has to work twice as hard for half the results." It wasn't true. I had earned everything I had, but that story had been told so early and repeated so often that even I began to accept it. Maybe I was just fortunate. Maybe things really did come easier to me. Maybe I owed my family something for succeeding where Brittany didn't. The house became the clearest example of this imbalance. I bought it at 27, using every dollar I had saved since my first job at 15. It was meant to be a rental property, a way to create extra income and protect my future. I studied the area, ran the numbers, and felt genuinely proud of myself for the first time in years. Then my father injured his back. "It's only temporary," my mother said when she called to explain they were losing their apartment. "Just until your father recovers. 6 months, maybe a year." That was 3 years ago. During that time, my father went to only 2 medical appointments and made no effort to find work that suited his condition. My mother quit her part-time grocery job, saying it was too tiring to work while caring for my father and Brittany, who had moved back in after her latest relationship ended. Brittany, unsurprisingly, hadn't worked in more than 2 years. Meanwhile, I kept paying the mortgage, property taxes, insurance, and most of the utility bills. When the water heater failed, I paid for the replacement. When the roof needed fixing, I handled the expense. When my mother casually mentioned they couldn't afford Christmas presents, I sent money. When Brittany said she needed new outfits for job interviews she never actually went to, I transferred funds. I stopped calculating the totals sometime after it passed $40,000. It was simpler not to know, easier to convince myself I was only supporting family, being a responsible daughter, doing what anyone in my position would do. But the small acts of dishonesty began to pile up. My mother would upload photos of expensive dinners online while telling me they were struggling to buy groceries. Brittany would flaunt new designer handbags while I carefully planned my spending on basic needs. My father complained constantly about being bored yet dismissed every idea of remote work he could easily do from home. I remember calling them last Thanksgiving, genuinely hoping we might finally spend the holiday together. My mother sighed and explained they couldn't afford the gas to drive the 40 minutes to my apartment. I offered to come to them instead, to bring the entire meal and do all the work so they wouldn't have to do anything. She replied kindly, then added that Brittany had already arranged dinner at a new Italian restaurant downtown. Apparently, she had been craving authentic pasta. Maybe next year. That Italian restaurant, the one where entrees started at $50 each. The place they supposedly couldn't afford, yet always managed to pay for when Brittany wanted to go. I spent that Thanksgiving alone, eating leftover takeout and reminding myself it wasn't a big deal. Families were complicated. Everyone had challenges. I should feel thankful that I was able to help, even if that help was never recognized or returned. Now, sitting in my apartment with a $10,800 charge glaring at me, I could no longer cling to the comforting stories I had told myself about my family. They hadn't borrowed my credit card details. They hadn't asked for approval. They had simply taken what they wanted, confident I would cover the cost as I always had. When my mother told me, she smirked, like my financial stability was a joke, like my role was only to fund their lives while receiving nothing in return. My thoughts went back to the house. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a pleasant backyard, worth around $280,000 in today's market. A home occupied by 3 people who paid nothing and expected everything. The crew left on Saturday. They would be unreachable for 12 days. No phone signal, no internet, no way to interfere with whatever choices I might make while they were gone. For the first time, I allowed myself to think about what I had always avoided. They set sail that Saturday morning. I know because my mother sent me a photo of the 3 of them standing on the ship's deck, champagne glasses raised, wide smiles on their faces. The caption read, "Family vacation at last. Thanks for making dreams come true." She had actually written that, as if I had generously given them this trip, rather than having it taken through unauthorized charges on my credit card. I stared at the picture for a long time, zooming in on their faces. My mother, glowing in a new sundress I had never seen before. My father, looking healthier than he had in years, his so-called chronic back pain clearly not an issue as he posed confidently by the railing. And Brittany, perfectly styled, sun-kissed, smiling like she was entitled to every luxury life could offer. They hadn't even invited me. Not that I would have gone, or could have taken time off work, but the exclusion hurt more than I expected. 3 family members enjoying a luxury cruise, and the one who made it financially possible wasn't even considered. That was the moment everything became clear. Not as pure anger, though plenty of it burned beneath the surface. Not just as pain, though years of unspoken hurt weighed heavily on my chest. What settled over me, instead, was something quieter, and far more dangerous. I came to a clear realization I had been prepared for this role my entire life. I was always the provider, the responsible one, the person who never complained, never demanded, and never expected anything in return. My family had conditioned me to accept their behavior as normal, to feel guilty for my own achievements rather than proud, and to believe that loving them meant letting them take whatever they wanted without consequence. And I had allowed it. Year after year, sacrifice after sacrifice, I maintained this dynamic out of fear. Would they still love me if I stopped paying? Would I remain part of the family if I demanded fairness? That fear of rejection kept me compliant, kept me silent, and drained my money and energy into a void that only seemed to grow hungrier with every contribution. But as I looked at that photo of them celebrating with the money I had provided, something inside me shifted. The fear wasn't gone, but it no longer controlled me. Instead, I felt a cold, clear understanding. This relationship had always been one-sided, and I was exhausted from struggling against the current. They hadn't apologized for taking the money. They hadn't even acknowledged that it was wrong. My mother's casual dismissal, her certainty that I would simply endure another blow, revealed how little they valued me. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a resource, an ATM with a heartbeat. That evening, I did something I had never done before. I opened a spreadsheet and calculated exactly how much money I had given my family over the past 3 years. Not rough estimates, but actual figures from bank statements and credit card records. The total was staggering. $73,000. This included free housing, covered utilities, emergency funds, unreciprocated gifts, and now the cruise. $73,000 I had essentially burned to keep people comfortable who would never do the same for me. I thought about what that money could have meant for my own life, a better retirement fund, trips I had dreamed about but never taken, security for my future instead of subsidizing their present. Then I considered my house, the property I owned outright. They had been living there without a lease, without any legal agreement. I had been so focused on being a good daughter and avoiding conflict that I never formalized our arrangement. They were overstaying guests who had taken advantage of my hospitality for 3 years. Another photo arrived on my phone, an elaborate seafood dinner, plates piled with lobster and crab legs. "Eating like royalty tonight," the message read on my dime. While I sat in my modest apartment calculating how many extra hours I would need to work to cover their vacation, something in me hardened. Not broke, hardened. The part of me that had always made excuses, forgiven, and prioritized their comfort over my own well-being finally became unbreakable. I was done. Not gradually, not maybe, not conditionally, done. Done being the family safety net. Done sacrificing my financial security for people who treated my generosity as entitlement. Done pretending this was normal, acceptable, or anything less than systematic exploitation. They had 12 days at sea, 12 days of lobster dinners, champagne toasts, and family bonding that excluded me. 12 days during which they couldn't interfere with my decisions. I picked up my phone and scrolled until I found the contact I needed, Patricia, the real estate agent who had helped me buy both my properties. She had often mentioned that she could get excellent offers if I ever decided to sell. My thumb hovered over the call button. This would change everything. There was no turning back from this choice. No pretending it hadn't happened. No hope for family reconciliation. After crossing this line, I thought about my mother's smirk, my father's feigned back pain, and Brittany's endless sense of entitlement. I pressed call. "Jessica, it's so good to hear from you." Patricia's warm voice came through the phone. Professional, yet friendly. "How are things? Still happy with the apartment?" "Yes, very happy," I replied, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "Actually, I'm calling about the other property, the house on Maple Drive." "Oh." I could almost hear her interest sharpen. "Are you finally considering selling?" "I've been waiting for this call for 3 years." 3 years. The same amount of time my family had been living there rent-free. Patricia didn't know the specifics of my arrangement, but she had always been clear the house was in a desirable neighborhood with strong market demand. "What do you think I could get for it in the current market?" I asked. She paused. I heard the click of a keyboard in the background. "Let me pull up the recent comparables." "Okay, looking at similar homes in the area that's sold in the last 6 months, you're looking at anywhere from $270,000 to $300,000, depending on condition." "Is the property still in good shape?" I thought about the repairs I had handled over the years, the new water heater, roof work, updated appliances before my family moved in. "It should be. I've maintained it well." Then I'd estimate we could list it at $285,000 and potentially get offers above asking. The market is hot right now, especially for move-in ready homes in good school districts. She paused. "Do you want me to come take a look?" I could do a walkthrough and give a more accurate assessment. This was where it became complicated. "There's a situation," I said carefully. "The house is currently occupied." "Oh, you have tenants." "That's not necessarily a problem. We can sell with tenants in place or wait for the lease to expire, depending on your timeline." "Not exactly tenants, family members, and there's no formal lease agreement." Silence stretched for a moment. When Patricia spoke again, her tone was more serious. "That does change things slightly. Are they aware you're considering selling?" "No. I prefer to keep it that way for now." Another pause. "Jessica, I want to help, but I need to make sure we do this properly. Without a lease, they're essentially at-will occupants. In Ohio, you'd need to provide reasonable notice, typically 30 days, before showing the house to buyers. However, some buyers, especially investors, may be interested in purchasing with current occupants in place. I had done my research. I knew the legal requirements, but I also knew something else. What if the sale closed while they were away? They were currently on a cruise, gone for 12 days. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "That's an aggressive timeline, but not impossible if we find a cash buyer who wants to move quickly. There are investors who seek exactly this type of situation, fast closings, no contingencies, willing to handle occupant transitions themselves." "How fast?" I asked. "I've closed deals in 7 days before. 10 is more typical for a rush situation." She hesitated. "Jessica, are you sure about this? Selling a property out from under family members it's a significant decision." "I'm not judging. I just want to make sure you've considered it carefully." Had I thought it through? I had thought about nothing else since my mother walked out of my apartment with that smug smile. I had thought about the years of sacrifice, the tens of thousands I had spent, and the complete lack of appreciation or reciprocity that I had reflected on what it meant to be treated more like a resource than a person. I was certain I wanted to move forward. All right then. Let me make a few calls and see who might be interested in a quick purchase. I have several investor clients always looking for opportunities like this. Can you send me any updated interior photos? This was where things became complicated. I hadn't stepped inside the house in nearly a year. My family had made it clear that my visits were unwelcome, implying that wanting to see my own property was somehow inappropriate. But I still had the original listing photos from when I bought the house, and the keys were in my possession. "I can get you photos by tomorrow," I said. "And Patricia, thank you for making this easier than it had to be. My goal is to help my clients reach theirs, whatever those goals may be." I'll be in touch. After hanging up, I sat with the weight of my decision. I understood the impact of what I was about to set in motion. This would permanently alter my relationship with my family, if there was even a relationship left to alter. My mother would never forgive me. My father would likely never speak to me again. Brittany would probably post something dramatic online about betrayal, family, and how she had always believed I was envious of her. Yet, oddly, none of that felt as frightening as it once had. For years, the fear of losing my family had kept me compliant. But what was I really losing? People who only reached out when they needed something. A mother who mocked my concerns about security. A father who skipped my college graduation, but never missed a single one of Brittany's dance recitals. A sister who had never once asked about my life, my work, or my dreams. I logged into the property management portal I use for both my homes. There it was, the house on Maple Drive. My house, the one I had worked tirelessly for, saved for, and sacrificed for. The property that had become a symbol of everything wrong in my family dynamic. As I studied the listing at the address I had memorized years ago, I noticed something new in the document section. A file had been uploaded within the past month. Clicking on it, I saw a residency declaration form, partially completed in my mother's handwriting. The form claimed that the occupants had established residency and were requesting formal recognition as long-term residents. A chill ran through me. They were attempting to establish legal rights to my home, making it more difficult for me to remove them. Any remaining doubts I had disappeared instantly. This was no longer just about the crew's money. It was about survival, my survival. I grabbed my phone and texted Patricia. How soon can we meet? The next day, I took a personal day from work for the first time in over 2 years. I told my supervisor I had a family emergency, which wasn't entirely false. My family was the emergency, and I was finally treating it as such. I met Patricia at a coffee shop near her office at 10 a.m., arriving early to secure a quiet corner table. She walked in with a thick folder of papers and a look of professional focus. I made some calls last night, she said, sitting down immediately. I have 3 potential buyers for a quick purchase. One stands out, an investor named Gerald. He specializes in fast property acquisitions, manages occupant issues himself, and pays cash. For a quick closing with occupants in place, he'd likely offer around $260,000. It's below market value, but the convenience is considerable. He would take responsibility for anyone living there. $260,000. Slightly less than the house's market value, but still a significant amount. More importantly, the process would be quick, straightforward, and completed before my family returned from their luxury vacation. What about the residency form I found? I asked. Does that affect anything? Patricia shook her head. I looked into it. In Ohio, simply filling out a form does not establish legal residency, especially when the form was never submitted to any official authority. Your family members are what we call lenses, people permitted to occupy a property but with no legal tenancy rights. That permission can be revoked at any time. If the property is sold while they are still living there, the new owner must handle their removal if they refuse to leave voluntarily. In Gerald's case, he has lawyers and procedures for exactly these situations. He has handled far more complex cases than family members overstaying their welcome. I picture my parents returning from their cruise to find the locks changed and a notice from a stranger giving them 30 days to leave. Part of me, the part conditioned since childhood to put their feelings first, cringed at the thought. But a larger part, the part that had finally awakened after years of dormancy, felt a sense of satisfaction. Tell me more, I said. Patricia handed me a business card. Gerald has been in real estate investment for 20 years. Highly professional, extremely discreet. He understands that family situations can be complicated and doesn't ask questions. What he provides is a clean transaction and a complete separation from the current occupant's issues. Has he shown interest in my property specifically? I asked. I sent him the details last night, Patricia replied. He drove by the house this morning and called an hour ago. He's ready to make an offer, $265,000, all cash, closing in 7 days. 7 days. My family would still be at sea. The cruise didn't return for another 11 days. I could complete the entire transaction before they even set foot on land. What do I need to do? Patricia slid a stack of papers across the table. First, we need to review disclosure requirements. Ohio law mandates that sellers disclose certain details about the property's condition. You'll also need to confirm there are no liens, encumbrances, or legal complications that could delay the sale. She paused. I need to ask you directly, just for the record. Do you see any reason this sale shouldn't go forward? I considered the question carefully. Was there any legal reason I couldn't sell my own property? No. Was there a moral obligation to people who had taken advantage of my generosity for years? I no longer believed so. Was there any part of me that wanted to maintain the dysfunctional status quo? To continue being the family doormat? No. There was nothing stopping me. Let's proceed, I said. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing and completing the paperwork that I signed the disclosure forms, reviewed the sales agreement, and gave Patricia the authority to negotiate on my behalf. The process was surprisingly smooth, almost anticlimactic, given the significance of what I was doing. By noon, everything was set for an expedited sale. As I gathered my things to leave, Patricia gently touched my arm. Jessica, I've been doing this job for 15 years, she said. I've seen many family situations, some of them quite difficult. Whatever led you to this decision, know that you're not doing anything wrong. This is your property. You have every right to sell it. Her words meant more to me than I could express. Thank you, Patricia. I know this must feel strange, selling a house right from under my own parents. It doesn't feel strange at all, she replied quietly. It seems like someone finally decided to stop being taken advantage of. In my experience, that takes more courage than most people have. I left the coffee shop feeling lighter than I had in years. The decision was made, the process was underway, and for the first time I could remember, I was prioritizing my own needs. That evening, my phone buzzed with another photo from the cruise. This one showed Brittany by the pool in a bikini that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. The caption read, "Living my best life," followed by a string of celebratory emojis. Living her best life on my money. Sitting alone, I processed the reality that I was about to fundamentally change all of our lives. I didn't reply to the photo. Instead, I opened my banking app and stared at the pending charge, $10,800. It would take months of extra work, careful budgeting, and sacrifice to cover, all so my family could enjoy champagne and lobster. Then I checked the email Patricia had sent with the preliminary sales agreement, $265,000. Enough to pay off the cruise, clear any lingering guilt, and still leave a substantial amount to invest in my own future rather than my family's endless needs. The math was simple. The emotions were not. But for the first time, I was choosing myself. The sale progressed faster than even Patricia had anticipated. Gerald, the investor, was as professional and efficient as she had described. He requested minimal documentation, asked no questions about the rapid sale, and had his legal team prepare the closing paperwork within 48 hours. 3 days after my meeting with Patricia, I received an email confirming that Gerald had completed his final review and was ready to close immediately. The only step left was my signature on the final documents, which I could complete electronically. I stared at the signature line for a long time. This was it, the point of no return. Once I signed, the house would no longer be mine. My parents and Brittany would occupy someone else's property, subject to the new owner's discretion. My phone buzzed again. Another cruise update, this time a video my mother had posted showing all 3 of them at a shipboard entertainment show. They were laughing, clapping, and seemed happier and more carefree than I had seen them in years. All of it funded by me, without even a hint of gratitude. I signed the documents. The confirmation came almost immediately. Congratulations on your sale, the email read. Closing is scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Funds will be transferred within 24 to 48 hours of closing. Tomorrow. In less than 24 hours, I would no longer own the house on Maple Drive. My family would no longer live in my property. The dynamic that had defined our relationship for 3 years, longer if you counted all the other ways they had exploited me, would be permanently changed. I expected to feel guilty. My whole life had taught me to feel guilty for prioritizing myself, for not sacrificing enough, for not being generous enough with people who never returned the favor. But that evening, as I sat in my apartment watching the sunset through the window, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. True, deep peace. For the first time I could remember, I had made a decision entirely based on my own needs and desires. Not what my mother wanted, not what would please Brittany, not what would maintain family harmony. My choice, my responsibility, my life. The closing occurred the next afternoon without any issues. I signed the final paperwork electronically while at my desk at work, minimizing the window whenever a coworker passed by. The funds transfer was immediate. $265,000 was deposited into my account, minus closing costs and Patricia's commission. After all deductions, I still walked away with over $240,000. Gerald, the new owner, wasted no time. Within hours, his property management team had changed the locks and posted formal notices on the property, informing occupants that it had been sold and giving them 30 days to vacate. Standard procedure for an investor taking over a property with tenants. I didn't tell anyone what I had done. Not coworkers, not close friends, not the distant relatives I spoke to occasionally. This was between me and my family. They would learn soon enough. The cruise ship was scheduled to return Sunday morning. By my calculation, my family would arrive in Columbus Sunday evening. They would drive to the Maple Drive house, tired from travel but still glowing from 12 days of luxury. They would approach the door, likely complaining about carrying their own luggage, and find the locks changed and an official notice taped to the door. I wondered how long it would take them to grasp what had happened. My mother, always alert to threats to her comfort, would probably realize immediately. My father might take longer, given his deep-seated denial. Brittany would likely cry and post something dramatic online before fully processing the situation. Then they would call me. I was certain of that. They would scream, demand explanations, and accuse me of betrayal, cruelty, and everything else they could to make me feel guilty for finally refusing to be their victim. I prepared for those calls, not necessarily to answer them, but to withstand the flood of notifications, voicemails, and texts that would inevitably arrive. I drafted one response, to be sent once. You used my credit card without permission for a luxury vacation. I chose to sell my property. Both were choices. Both have consequences. The days between the closing and their return were some of the most peaceful I had experienced in years. I went to work, cooked meals I actually enjoyed instead of the cheapest options, and began researching vacation destinations I might visit someday, now that I wasn't funneling all my disposable income into supporting my family. I also did something I had been avoiding for years. I found a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and scheduled an appointment for the week after my family returned. Whatever happened next, I knew I needed professional support to process decades of conditioning and dysfunction. This decision, though it felt right, was still one of the hardest I had ever made. On Saturday night, the night before their ship was scheduled to arrive, I completely powered off my phone. Not just silenced or on Do Not Disturb, but entirely off. I wasn't ready to face their reactions, and I had finally realized that I didn't need to be available on their timeline. That night, I slept better than I had in months. No anxiety about what they might demand. No guilt over what I wasn't providing. No fear about what would happen when the money ran out, because now I had full control over it. Sunday morning, I treated myself to a proper breakfast, something I rarely did. Eggs Benedict from scratch, fresh squeezed orange juice, and coffee made from the fancy beans I had been saving for a special occasion. It felt like a celebration, and it was. I was celebrating my independence for the first time as an adult. By 11 a.m., I turned my phone back on. Instantly, notifications poured in. Text messages, voicemails, missed calls, 25 missed calls in total, all from my mother. The texts escalated quickly, moving from confusion to panic and anger. I expected the voicemails to be worse. I looked at the screen, noting the 25 missed calls, and smiled, pouring myself another cup of coffee. The voicemails unfolded a story of their own, starting with confusion, moving through denial and anger, and finally reaching genuine panic. The first message, left at 8:47 p.m. the previous evening, was my mother's clipped and irritated voice. Jessica, we're home, and the door won't open. Did you change the locks while we were gone? Call me back. The second, at 8:52 p.m. read, Jessica, there's some kind of notice on the door about the property being sold. This must be a mistake. Call immediately. At 9:15 p.m., my father's voice appeared, confused and pleading. Honey, your mother is very upset. We can't get into the house. Please call us and explain what's happening. After that, the voicemails from my mother continued, each one escalating. By the 5th, she was shouting, by the 8th, crying, and by the 12th, she returned to cold fury, threatening legal action, disownment, and various forms of retaliation that would never happen. Brittany left only 2 messages. The first was accusatory and dramatic. I can't believe you would do this to us, to your own family. You're a monster, Jessica, an actual monster. The second, left hours later, was tearful and manipulative. I don't have anywhere to go. Where am I supposed to sleep? Don't you care about me at all? I listened to all 23 voicemails while sitting on my couch, coffee in hand, letting their distress wash over me without letting it drag me down. Each message reinforced my decision instead of weakening it. Not once do they apologize for taking $10,800 from me. Not once do they acknowledge living in my house rent-free for 3 years. Not once do they show understanding that their actions had consequences. It was all about them, their inconvenience, their suffering, their victimhood. In their version, they were innocent people wronged by an ungrateful daughter who owed them everything. Around noon, the text messages shifted in tone. My mother, having regrouped, sent long messages explaining she understood I might be upset about the cruise charges but called my reaction extreme. She offered to repay me over time, a promise I knew was empty. She said they hadn't intended to upset me, assuming I wouldn't mind, given my past generosity. Still, no simple apology. No, I'm sorry for taking your money without asking. Brittany's texts were sporadic, swinging between anger and calculated vulnerability. She reminded me of all the help I had given her before, implying it entitled her to my continued support. She accused me of jealousy, of resenting her for being prettier and more popular, and threatened to expose me as cruel and heartless. I saved all of these messages, partly as documentation in case any legal threats became real, and partly to have a record of who they truly were in case my resolve ever faltered. At 2 p.m., my mother tried a different approach. She sent a message that was almost reasonable, suggesting we meet in person, just the 2 of us, to discuss and resolve whatever had happened. She suggested a coffee shop close to my apartment, somewhere neutral. She even offered to come to my area, which was a complete shift from years of making me chase after her. For a brief moment, I thought about it. The side of me that had been conditioned to calm situations, smooth conflicts, and put peace above everything else resurfaced. I wondered if we could find some kind of compromise. Maybe there was a way forward that didn't involve cutting ties entirely. Then I remembered her smirk. I remembered how she brushed off my concerns about the cruise charges, how casually she assumed that my money belonged to her, that my property was hers to use, and that my life existed to support her needs. That memory grounded me. I typed out the response I had already prepared. You chose to use my credit card without my permission for a luxury vacation. I chose to sell my property. Both were choices, and both have consequences. I sent the message, and then did something I should have done a long time ago. I blocked her number. Then I blocked my father's number. After that, I blocked Brittany's number. To be thorough, I removed all of them from my social media and blocked their email addresses as well. The silence that followed felt overwhelming. For the first time in my adult life, my family could not reach me. There were no calls, no texts, no messages, no digital access at all. If they wanted to contact me, they would have to come to my apartment in person, and I had already prepared myself for that scenario. They arrived 3 days later. I wasn't surprised. My mother had always been persistent, and being blocked was not something she would accept without confrontation. I was working from home that Wednesday when I heard the noise at my door. It wasn't a knock. It was pounding, fists hitting wood with anger and force. Jessica, I know you're in there. Open the door right now. My mother's voice was sharp and indignant. I stayed at my desk and kept typing, allowing her to wear herself out against a door that stayed shut. She continued yelling, saying this was absurd and that I couldn't just cut off my own family. The pounding went on for several minutes. I could hear my father speaking quietly, likely trying to calm her. Then Brittany added her voice, half pleading and half demanding. Jessica, please. We just want to understand. What did we do wrong? They spoke as if they were genuinely confused, as if taking $10,800 without permission was unclear. as if living rent-free in my property for 3 years while I paid every expense was normal family behavior. Eventually, the noise drew attention. I heard a neighbor open their door and ask if everything was okay. I heard my mother explain that she was only visiting her daughter. The building had strict rules about disturbances, and I knew security would be contacted if this continued. After about 20 minutes, the noise stopped. I heard footsteps moving away, the elevator bell, and then silence returning to the hallway. I waited another 10 minutes before checking, just to be certain. They were gone. That evening, I found a letter pushed under my door. My mother's handwriting was tight and rushed on lined paper, clearly torn from a notebook. "Jessica, I don't understand what's happening. Yes, we used your credit card, but we've always shared everything as a family. You never complained before. Is this really about money? You know you have more than enough. You've always been the successful one, the one who never needed help. We're the ones struggling. Your father can barely walk most days. Brittany is dealing with depression. I'm exhausted from taking care of everyone. And now you've forced us out of the only home we had. We're staying in a motel because of you." A motel? Is that what you wanted? To see your own family suffer? I raised you better than this. I gave up everything for you girls, and this is how you repay me. I will never forgive you for this. Never. But I am still your mother. If there is any chance we can fix this, call me. Mom. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in the file where I kept all of their other messages and letters. Every word confirmed my decision. The manipulation, the guilt-tripping, the total lack of accountability, it was all too clear. Even facing the consequences of their actions, they refused to admit any wrongdoing. I did not respond to the letter. There was nothing left to say that I hadn't already said. The time for discussions, negotiations, and giving them another chance had passed. I had offered hundreds of chances over 32 years, and each one had been used to take more from me. The following weeks were surprisingly quiet. Later, I learned they had found temporary housing with a distant cousin on my mother's side, someone I had barely met. That arrangement lasted only about 3 weeks before they overstayed their welcome there as well. Meanwhile, I did something I had never allowed myself to do. I began living my own life, free from the constant demands of their needs. I kept my appointments with my new therapist, who helped me recognize that what I had endured wasn't merely family drama, but a recurring pattern of emotional and financial abuse. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during years of being my family's unpaid caretaker. I started planning a future centered solely on my own goals and desires. It was not easy. The guilt my mother had instilled in me did not vanish overnight. Some mornings, I would wake up convinced I had made a terrible mistake, certain I was the monster Brittany had accused me of being. But those moments grew less frequent with time. The peace of no longer being constantly needed, drained, and exploited was more valuable than I could have imagined. The $10,800 from the cruise remained on my credit card, accruing interest. I paid it off methodically, determined not to let it burden me, even though it still burned as a symbol of their betrayal. With the proceeds from the house sale now invested in earning returns, I could cover the payments comfortably. Somehow, it felt appropriate that their vacation would be the last thing I ever financed for them. 1 month after the house sale, I received a formal letter from a lawyer. My mother had apparently followed through on her threat of legal action. The letter claimed I had illegally evicted family members and demanded $100,000 for their suffering in relocation. I forwarded it to a lawyer recommended by Patricia, an expert in property disputes. Her response was immediate and reassuring. "They have no case," she said over the phone. "The property was yours outright. They had no lease, no rental agreement, nothing that establishes legal tenancy. The new owner followed proper eviction procedures. This is pure harassment. Ignore it. If they actually file a suit, which I doubt given their weak position, we'll respond accordingly. But most likely, this is just an attempt to intimidate you into paying them." She was right. No lawsuit ever came. The threatening letters stopped after a few weeks, likely when their lawyer realized there was no basis for a claim. 6 months after the house sale, I heard through a cousin still in contact with both sides that my parents had finally secured stable housing. They were renting a smaller, less desirable apartment than the house they had previously occupied for free. My father had applied for disability benefits, a process he had long avoided because it required documenting his condition. Brittany had moved in with a boyfriend she had met online, a relationship reportedly struggling. I felt no satisfaction in their hardships, but I also felt no guilt. Their circumstances were the direct result of their choices. Decades of choices had left them relying entirely on taking from others instead of building anything sustainable for themselves. I had been their preferred target, but I was no longer available. They would have to face reality without me as a buffer. Meanwhile, my own life had changed. The money from selling the house was safely invested, generating returns that would support a comfortable retirement. The apartment I lived in finally felt truly mine, not just a place to sleep between sessions of supporting my family. I had taken a real vacation for the first time in years, a week in the mountains, hiking, reading, and ignoring my phone because no one was demanding anything from me. Therapy helped me understand that my generosity wasn't just choice. I had been conditioned to be their caretaker, to believe my value came from what I could give rather than who I was. Breaking that pattern was the hardest thing I had ever done, but also the most necessary. About 8 months later, my mother reached out once more. She somehow found my work email and sent a message that mixed accusation with appeal. She mentioned her age and declining health and pleaded for reconciliation for the sake of the family. I read it carefully, looking for any sign of true accountability, acknowledgement of wrongdoing, or a genuine apology, not for the circumstances, but for their behavior. There was none. Just the same manipulation, the same expectation that I owed them, the same blindness to their role in our estrangement. I deleted the email without replying. Some relationships cannot be fixed because the foundation was flawed from the start. My family never saw me as a person with my own needs and boundaries. They saw me as a resource. When that resource stopped being available, all they offered were demands for more. Through a cousin, I later heard that my mother had told anyone who would listen that I had betrayed them over money, that I had always been cold and selfish, and that they had sacrificed everything for me and received nothing in return. The story she created was remarkable in its inversion of reality. In her version, she was the victim and I the villain. But I no longer cared about her narrative. I had my own truth, documented in credit card statements, bank records, and the deed to a house I once owned. I had my peace, hard-won and precious, and my future, no longer tied to supporting people who would never appreciate the sacrifice. The last I heard, my mother's health continued to decline, my father remained mostly housebound, and Brittany was on her third boyfriend since being forced to support herself. The cousin mentioned that my family was trying to reconnect with extended relatives they had alienated, seeking new sources of support now that I was gone. I wished them luck, not out of forgiveness, but because their happiness or misery was no longer my responsibility. Carrying them for so long had been a weight I hadn't realized was crushing me, and letting it go felt like freedom. The house on Maple Drive was sold to an investor who renovated it and rented it to a nice young couple. According to Patricia, the neighborhood stayed desirable, the market strong, and life went on, with or without my family's drama at the center. As for me, I was finally free to discover who I was outside of sacrificing everything for people who gave nothing back. That discovery, more than the money, more than revenge, was the true reward I had earned. Looking back, selling that house wasn't about revenge. It was reclaiming my life from people who had been taking it piece by piece for 32 years. They called it betrayal. I called it survival. And if given the choice again, I would make the same decision, without hesitation and without regret.